A new exercise that we've started to see in some competitive situations is an L-sit to support. Some people may have called this more of a press to handstand. In my mind, it's really the starting point. It's not really a press to handstand. Press to handstand is more about control and strength. This is more about using some swing to kind of make up for what you might lack in strength. But what we're going to go over now are some great exercises to prepare for that tuck support into a handstand. On this first exercise, what we're looking for is to start in a support position on those low parallettes, knees deep into the chest in that tuck, and eventually working on some movement pattern. How do we initiate this movement? And ideally thinking about a nice tuck helps with a quicker, more efficient turnover position. So as you start getting the hips and shoulders on top of your hands, we want to be thinking about keeping the knees deep into the chest and getting those hips into position that we would call a tuck inversion or a tuck shoulder stand. The return back to the support and understanding this movement pattern will allow us to create efficiency through that roll. Okay, part two of this sequence is actually going to have two parts to it. The first one is a shoulder stand. Now, many of you probably have never really done a shoulder stand before, but it's an extension of a headstand. But instead of your head being on the floor and balancing on 3 points, it's taking your head off the floor, having some space, and controlling solely from your hands and those shoulders as stabilizers. This position can build from what we did in the previous exercise in the tuck, but now you're going to be working fully extended. Ideally, when you're doing this, it might be new to understand the angle that's so important to find balance, and you'll find yourself tipping over the top. So if you're doing this for the first time, it's fine to do it stomach to wall, so you can actually have your feet touching the wall if you need to for some additional stability, and building to the secondary variation, where you're in that position, finding that angle, finding some stabilization, and then from there, pushing yourself into a full handstand. So essentially from a static shoulder stand position, pushing into a handstand push-up. It's challenging, you need a lot of strength, but essentially this is the completion of the full support to handstand. An additional exercise to consider here is basically building a strict handstand push-up from that shoulder stand, from a deficit. And this is really about building control and understanding where your body is within space. Most of the time we're doing handstand push-ups, we're past vertical, we're in an arch position, and you think that this becomes the correct freestanding variation. Not necessarily the case. So a good way to be working on this is thinking about shoulder stand, getting control in that nice short of vertical angle that we really like, and pushing to a plank position. Over time, slowly getting that angle to be closer and closer to vertical until eventually you're pushing all the way up to the handstand. You can do this with your back to the wall, but the idea would be not to touch the wall unless you really need it. Have it there as a spotter, but ideally trying to stay closer to vertical or short of vertical, and only having your feet on the wall if something should happen where you go too far past. Whenever we're doing these exercises, we always want to be thinking about the movements in both directions, both in the way that you're going up, but also on the descent. The negative is important here. So one additional drill that we think is important is to start in the handstand, and what does the movement pattern look like back to your start? We always like to emphasize this idea that you are not done with a movement until you come back to your starting point. Especially if you're looking to repeat the movement time and time again, we need to understand not only the movement pattern on the way up, but also on the descent. So this exercise will start in a handstand, bring the knees deep into the chest. As those elbows start to bend, recreate that nice tight tuck position and come back to your same starting point in that tuck support. The descent will matter as much as the ascent again, so take your time with it. If you're not so used to holding a handstand on the parallettes, you can do this up against the wall and slowly lowering down with that assistance up against the wall as needed. This support tuck to inversion is a really great step to work towards an eventual press to handstand. They are separate movements, so don't really think about this as a press quite yet. It's a good starting point, and these drills are meant to understand getting inverted from the tuck, but think about this as a really great starting point to eventually building towards that nice controlled press to handstand. Thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe. Head to PowerMonkeyFitness.com for more information on what we got going on, as well as the PowerMonkey training app in both iOS and Android.